Hello and welcome to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. This week we are doing a very special episode for Armed Forces Day. Any excuse to get back into conversation with people who shared our experiences at Sandhurst and much more since. There could be mayhem, there could be insights, there could be both. So come and join us for Being with Lifelong Friends. Hello, rascals.
Hello.
So I have no idea quite how to introduce these people. Bridget, would you like to have a go at welcoming these people to our domain?
I love how you're saying these people.
These people.
Right, so, both of the women, the wonderful, amazing women who are joining us today, were a cohort of women who went to Sandhurst as the first intake of women who were not Women's Royal Army Corps, and then went on to join the military police and the artillery. Am I right in that? I always assume you were a policewoman before, Sally, so I assumed you joined the military police afterwards.
Yeah.
And then subsequently, Sally, you left the army after a long time, and Wendy, you kind of left but stayed on as a reserve, a permanent full-time reserve, doing PRE, wonderful managing of all kinds of, I guess, crises, etc., etc. Although I'm not sure you didn't cause a lot of them yourself. So anyway, yes, lovely Wendy Morton, Colonel Wendy Morton, MBE, I think.
Ooh. So Faux now, because I got married.
Oh God, yes. Sorry,
No, you've just blown my cover.
Sorry,
I've had 27 years of being covert and nobody knows.
Right, cancel the recording.
I'll edit that out. Damn it.
That's fine.
The wonderful fuck. Okay,
Stop swearing.
Okay. The wonderful Colonel Wendy Faux and the amazing Sally Purnell.
Before we get serious, if that's going to be at all possible, I would like to put both of these lovely ladies on the spot and ask them what their funniest recollection was of our time together at Sandhurst. What's the first thing that pings into your mind when you think about us all having been together all that time ago?
I have a very clear memory of second ball that they had at Sandhurst when the weather was a little bit better, and it wasn't our final end of commissioning ball, but it was the one before that, and they'd put a lot of money into it, and they'd hired all this stuff that they had inside, set up inside the gym, and they had a Venus flytrap, and you put a Velcro suit on and bounced up and down on a trampoline and threw yourself against a wall. And there was a lady from 2 Platoon who I didn't know very well. I think her name was Ginny. And she very kindly, and I have no idea why, because she didn't know me very well either, she had this beautiful blue ball gown, electric blue ball gown. I'm
crying because I know what you're going to say.
That I could borrow it because she thought the colour would suit me, and it did. It looked absolutely fantastic. And I remember stuffing it into this suit, Velcro suit for the Venus flytrap, and throwing myself enthusiastically upside down against the wall and sticking to the Velcro wall. And then when they peeled me off and I undid the suit that I zipped into, I had ripped off the arms of her beautiful ball gown. And the rest of 1 platoon then spent, who were all like crying on the floor with laughter because they knew I wasn't in my own dress, then spent the rest of the evening hiding me from her because she was desperate to see what I looked like in her dress.
Oh my God.
And then I had to go and find somewhere in Camberley a few days later to get it dry cleaned and professionally repaired. And she never did know.
She does now.
I will never forget that as long as I live. I've told so many people that story. I am sobbing. It's still brilliant. Come on then, Wendy.
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can follow that one at all. But I think it's recollections, and it was the show parades where we did so many things. showing, I think it was you, Bobby, wasn't it? Showing More Aware with all the binos or something. And carrying all of our binders. But I think the funniest one for me was when the boys' platoon, if am I allowed to call it boys' platoon, Bridge? I don't know. Anyway, they were then. And they had to show fluff removed from corridor because they'd got, mucky corridors and all that sort of stuff. And we'd all been in the bar and they said, can you come and help us out? And so they all lined up and we stood behind them with our drinks. And the duty student stepped forward to the Sergeant Major and said, "Sir, this is whatever platoon, showing fluff removed from corridor." And we all took one pace forward and they sort of sent us off. I don't think you could get away with that sort of thing anymore. But I think the show parades were because it was all creative, you could just have a bit of a laugh and do. I think we took it probably a step too far sometimes. But yeah, I think those show parades, but I don't think you can do that anymore.
I remember one of the graduate boys, we'll call them boys because we were all quite infantilized at that point. And I think he, on a show parade, he brought a guitar with him and he stepped forward and he said, "Colour song." I can't remember what it was. He gave something like, I just didn't have time to show whatever it was that I was supposed to show. So I've written a song instead. And he just started playing and played a song for the colour sergeant, And so many of these colour sergeants and staff sergeants would just look at and just go, "Yeah, okay, I'm just going to let it go because it shows a bit of creativity." And to be honest, I'm not even sure that shouting at you is going to make much difference. And also often they were trying not to laugh and trying to be serious as well. So yeah, it's true. I'd be really interested to hear whether or not the show parades are as creative as maybe they were in our time.
I don't think the story we told about my show parade would be described as creative, just completely inappropriate.
I don't know if you heard Sal and Wendy, because we did talk about the show parade of Bobby showing same coloured stockings, where she traumatised one of the colour sergeants or staff sergeants, colour sergeant, I think he was, because he was Welsh Guards.
I think traumatised is a
showing
little
up in her
strong.
in a mac and suspenders and a top, but no.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
Anyway, let's change the
traumatised.
subject because my best memory of Sal was her kidnapping that horrid little dog.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I forgot that.
I've got the photo.
Yes.
And then sending ransom notes.
With a black glove and holding bayonets to it. And
Let's be clear that no animals were harmed during the during that episode, but it was the dog.
we actually looked after him, I think, probably better than he was ever looked after.
Just so that anyone listening doesn't feel totally left out. This was the dog of one of the platoon commanders, right?
Yeah.
It was the troop commander.
Two platoon commander.
I think it's safe to say, if we try to encapsulate all of that, is that childishness is not just left at school, because it went all the way through Sandhurst. And if I want to be clear, we've talked a lot in our podcast episodes about play. And clearly, play or letting off steam or being a bit creative with all the things that we had to contend with at Sandhurst probably actually saved all of us in some way, shape or form, along with the training that we were actually undergoing. She says, getting all serious for a moment. So we can segue into, why the hell did you land yourself in that place in the first place?
So I actually wanted to join the army when I was 16. I went to Catterick to do a look at life with the WRAC, but it was hosted by the Royal Signals in Catterick. And I remember seeing this WRAC officer who was pregnant and had a golden retriever sat by her. And I looked at her and I went, "Oh no, I don't want to end up like that. No, that the army's not for me." And my dad said to me, "The army's already known because we're from a military family." He said, "Go off and do other things, and then if you still want to, then join." And after a few years of doing other stuff, I went to art college and joined the OTC, and then decided that I wanted to be a war photographer. So I thought, well, actually, if I join the army, I can learn more about how the army operates and how they work, and then be a better war photographer because I know where to sit on an aircraft or what they're doing, so I can anticipate where to be, the best place to be to get photographs and all that sort of thing. So that was then the reason for joining. And actually in my report, it sort of acknowledges that that's what I want to do, but I was told quite clearly that that's not what I would be doing. But yeah, that's why I joined the army. But the funny thing was, I think, that in 1999, I was running the training for the Royal Artillery, and I was stood on a hill pregnant with a Springer Spaniel. And I just stood there and went, oh my God, it is me. No.
Love that.
But yeah, so I wanted to be a war photographer. And that's why I joined the army. Bizarre, really. But I'm doing it, well, no, I'm not taking the photographs now, but supporting in my own way doing that. So yeah, it's good fun.
Sal?
My reasons were much more shallow. I had left school straight after my O-levels, as they were back in the day, in 1981. And as a 16-year-old, I joined the police as a cadet, because joining the police was all I'd ever wanted to do. And 10 years later, aged 26 and a non-graduate, I had supposedly made it because I was attached to the regional crime squad as the only female in our office. And having always aspired to get to this great place, I then saw some of the people that I was working with, and they were not as professional as I was used to. And I decided that I needed to do something about it. And it was either stay for 30 years because the police pension was really, really good and just get myself promoted and go and do stuff, or find something else. And I knew nothing about the army because I don't come from a military family. The West Midlands Police is the only police force in the country that has no regular barracks on it. So we never came into contact with soldiers particularly. And I saw an advert in one of the Sunday papers, and I just read, and it was a 2-page advert, and I just kept reading this and thinking, I would really love to do that. There's travel, there's adventure training, there's opportunities. I could do that. And so I went along to prove to myself more than anything else that I could get myself another job if I wanted to, but I had no real intention of joining. And somewhere down the line, it just suddenly dawned on me that I really, really wanted it. And it was the best decision I ever made. So I jumped ship after 10 years with the West Midlands Police, who were brilliant. They transferred all my pension across for me. And I just started a new career and got to travel because I got to places like Belize and Hong Kong before they disappeared. It was just the best decision I ever made.
Fabulous.
Yay. That's wonderful to hear. I mean, I joined the army because someone told me that I couldn't hack it. And so I just did it to prove them wrong. And also, I think by the time I got to the finishing my degree, and I'd been in the OTC for a few years, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do when I left uni. And so a big group of us from Oxford OTC just made a pact to join the army until we worked out what we really wanted to do. I think mine was even more shallow than yours. At least you really, really wanted it, Sal. I'm not sure I did ever.
I think mine was similar. I had got to 16. It's quite interesting, this age 16. I know that we've gone plus 10 with Sal, but she had done something entirely different beforehand. But I know at 16 that I could almost feel that I was going to start kicking over the traces at school, even though I decided that I was staying for sixth form. And so, claim to fame was being the head girl that nearly got kicked out because I did exactly that and kicked over the traces. But this person had come in to start talking about the army. So of course I wanted to leave at 16 and go and be a soldier. And she said, there's not a cat in hell's chance that you would survive basic training as a soldier. I thought that's a bit rude. Although my husband tells me on a daily basis that she was absolutely 110% correct. And
I think you know that too, actually.
Agreed. So if I can't be a soldier, I might as well go and be an officer then. So, but again, I joined not really, well, it wasn't, I think I'm a bit like Sal, it wasn't until I was actually in it at Sandhurst and with a broken ankle that I realised how much I wanted to do it. But it was almost like I had to be completely blatted before I actually realised that this was really important. So have you got the questions in front of you, Bridge, or do you want me to keep leading? I just wanted you to have a go rather than looking like I was being bossy.
Yeah, I'm going to have a go. I've got the questions.
All right.
I do have the questions. I printed them. I'm very efficient sometimes.
Yeah, whatever.
I think Bobby's just learning from the fact that I don't have a clue what the episode is. So anyway, so that kind of takes us neatly on to, I think all of us, once we're there and we go through you're going through the first 5 weeks, I think that if you don't really want to be there, then I think most people who didn't want to be there really sort of ended up not being there. So you had to really want it by that point. But let's talk about maybe the whole experience, because for many people, I'd say too, it was the best decision I made. I'm really glad I did it, but there were some really fucking horrible times there in it. So how about the good, the bad and the ugly, right? I think that when we've had reunions, sometimes, we've talked about things and we've been laughing and then we kind of look at each other and go, actually, that wasn't okay. So anything that you feel happy to share publicly that is not going to cause you to be sued for anything, then how about we have a listen to those sort of experiences? Sally?
Okay, well, the good's very easy. Because I joined the military police, I got, I suppose, some professional credibility behind me. But my experience within them, because they had, even when the WRAC existed, because they were very, very used to working with female NCOs, because they had people permanently attached to them, then my experience was with them that if you were good enough to do a job, they would give you the opportunity to do that job, regardless of your colour, your background, your sex. And if you weren't good enough, you didn't get to do it. So you could, if you were of the disposition to go and have a go and you were good enough to do something, they gave you your head to go and try it, and gave you enough ground to make your own mistakes and learn from them. So yeah, they were a good organisation for me. The bad, the first time I came across the bad, I think, was probably in the early 2000s. And when I went to JDSC, no, in fact, it would have been before that. It would have been the mid 90s. I went to JDSC, having spent 6 years in the military with an organisation that seemed to embrace women, to then go back to this big cohort of people, a lot of whom had joined with us, who just didn't seem to believe that women were doing the same job that they were doing. So on the first morning of the main military part of it, we were addressed by the colonel who was in charge of the course with, "Gentlemen, sit down." And there were 7 women on the course, and that set the tone for the whole time that we were there. And that's where I first also came across some unprofessionalism from one of the DS who was male. At the end of my 5-week session with him, he was either so lazy or so incapable of writing that my 5-week course report with him had nothing to do with me. And I did have gaps in my knowledge because I hadn't had much operational or exercise experience at that point. So I was expecting to be critiqued properly. Instead of critiquing me, he presented me with his final report, where he'd cut and pasted a whole load of average sentences and forgot to change the gender. So it had things like he, him, himself on 5 or 6 occasions. And I remember getting a highlighter and a red pen because I had to go back and see what I thought about my report, and just throwing it across the desk at him and walking out. And when I got my final report that had been written by the colonel, the half colonel in charge of our course, he'd obviously rewritten it because it was about me, about the things I could do and about the things I needed to build on. But yeah, that was my first experience of bad leadership. And the ugly probably came in Iraq in 2004, when I was out there as an acting lieutenant colonel, and to all intents and purposes, it was pretty much a full-on conflict zone. It was when Bahadi got awarded his VC, And it was the few months after the RMP6, after the RMP were murdered in the police station in Mujar Al Kabir. So it was a very difficult environment to work in. And I was out and about all the time on the ground because as a senior military police officer, I was trying to liaise with the 4 Iraqi brigade commanders and provide training for them. And, we were trying to get kit and training out to the police stations. And there was a CO who hadn't got an AOR who was also tasked to provide training for the police. And he wanted me to put a load of RMP NCOs under his operational control. And RMP don't go OPCON other cap badges or OPCOM because you have to stay independent in case there has to be an investigation or anything. And because I wouldn't let him expand his train set by giving him my people, he then seemed to make it his mission to undermine me professionally with senior officers and make my life on the ground as difficult as possible from that time onwards. And it just made a difficult situation worse than it needed to be. But for me, the good and my experiences outweighed the bad and the ugly.
Thanks, Sal. I think before we go on to Wendy, I would just like to ask us, and then Wendy can decide what she's saying and answer this question at the end as well. What do you think was the key lesson that you learned about leadership from the good, the bad, and the ugly? Where did you get your most learning from?
It was having professional credibility. And part of that possibly came from the guy that couldn't be bothered to write about me as me. Because my experience when I was a company commander and leading people was that if you clearly knew what you were talking about professionally, that you automatically got the respect from warrant officers, senior NCOs, junior NCOs, fellow officers from different cap badges and stuff. And also fairness. I think I've always had an innate sense of treating people fairly, and I don't like when people aren't given a fair chance at something. And I think some of that probably came from a bad experience at JDSC where the women were treated very, very badly to the point that actually at the end of the course, not by me, but there was a formal complaint was eventually submitted and the commandant of the course was removed from post.
I think the other thing, that professional credibility from your own side and standing up for yourself by the flinging of that report across the table to somebody who clearly did not know their people. I mean, that's the other thing for me, to cut and paste in that way. I'm bound to go the people route. I think Bridge knows that I do that now as well because of the roles that I've actually had, but cutting and pasting into a report and not knowing somebody. What was he? Was he practicing AI before it actually turned up? Badly. But I think that coupled with the professionalism and the fairness, that sounds like a good recipe for good leadership. So thanks, Sal. Wendy.
Oh my word. So I think the bad and the ugly wrap up together, but the good has been the absolute friendships that have come throughout from Sandhurst, through the OTC, where it started in the OTC. I met someone on a train the other day that I hadn't seen probably since Sandhurst, and he's just retired as a Major General. And I saw him on a train and I just went and said, "Hello, Rich." And he went, "Oh my God, Wendy." And we haven't seen each other in years. And the fact that that can happen so many times is just remarkable. And that goes for the sort of the spouses community as well. I have been privileged to be a part of that as well. And that's been huge. And now I'm going to get emotional, which is not right. It's not fair. Because the bad and ugly have been horrific. And when I left the regular army after 3 years as a lieutenant, which is very rare, because in the 3 years as a graduate, you should have reached captain, but I didn't. And I remember at my dining out, the CEO said to me, "So Wendy, I suppose the next time I see you will be in court." And I said, "No, sir, but you might enjoy reading my book." And that is the plan to do over the next year or so, because I need to have some sort of cathartic moments, I think. Yeah, it's the bad and the ugly have been horrific, really bad. But it's the people, you know, you only need one or two people to be there. And you've talked about it on your podcast as well. You only need one or two champions and cheerleaders and things like that, which see you through, which is good.
I'm just going to say for you, Wendy, this book is going to be glorious.
I was going to call it, actually, the working title is Patronising Patriarchy, actually.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Wendy, thank you so much for sharing. And I know that that's difficult. It's really obvious that it's difficult. And I'm so sorry that you have had that experience. I know that there are many women who have had fairly ugly experiences within the military. And it is a stain, as far as I'm concerned, on the military, because for the most part, I've been immensely proud to have served. You know, the actual organisation and the values or the ideas behind it are things that I still carry into my life after the military. But yeah, I recall having spoken to you and to other women at various reunions that we've had about some truly shocking experiences. And I know that there are many men who are from our cohort in the military who are now much more aware of how inappropriate and unprofessional, and those words that don't actually do it justice, are very much very aware now, if they were not aware at the time, of how awful their behaviour was to a large number of women. And so I'm grateful that you were able to at least share the impact that it had on you. And I look forward to the book too. I think it's going to be amazing.
It was fascinating, actually, yesterday. So I'm currently in Estonia supporting a NATO exercise. And yesterday there was an MLRS, and I was the first female to run an MLRS troop. And I just went up to this sergeant, who was the number one on the MLRS, and I just looked at her and I said, "You're my legacy."
Which is perfect.
And I think that's the point, Wendy. I'm going to let you take a breath, because I am in awe. I am needing to remind myself that we're doing this in celebration of Armed Forces Day with what we're talking about. But I am in awe that, one, you have created a legacy and you continue to do so in spite of that experience that you had. You are the one who's on this call, on this podcast, who has stayed serving for all these years. You know, you're the one that has taken that experience and turned it into something else. And so we've talked in a lot of episodes about, again, please don't think that I'm making this right, but the bigger the bucket of shit you swim in, the more there is to learn, and the more that you actually have found in yourself when you've crawled back out of it again. But I am a firm believer in that. And you are an absolute example of taking something and doing something with it. So, you know, in amidst all of that, what have you learned about your leadership style, which has kept you serving and now being a colonel MBE?
It's being yourself. It's taken me a long time to realise that actually being kind and thinking about people, and maybe not knowing all the acronyms and what's going on around me and all that sort of thing, which can be taught, that actually being human and being someone that people can talk to is all right. It's good. And being empathetic and being aware of soldiers as people, and just being and doing that it's okay. It's okay for me to be creative. It's okay for me to run a press facility with lots of people and just sort of saying, right, I'm really sorry. I know we said we're going to have lots of people jumping out the aeroplane, but we can't because of the weather. But we will have helicopters. And then 10 minutes later go, I know I said we could have helicopters, but we can't because of the weather. And just delivering it in such a way. And this photographer from one of the national newspapers turned around to me and he said, "It's a good job you have such a happy face." And it's just like, actually, and that's the point, is that actually you can overcome so much if you just treat people as people and see them as individuals, even in and amongst, an amorphous mass of the same uniform. And, especially when you take off berets and put helmets on, it's just even, you lose the identity even more. And I think it's giving people the time of day. And that's why I love doing the job that I do, because I can give a soldier 15 minutes or whatever and say, what about you? What do you do? And make them understand their role in that bigger picture, because it's so, so important. Every single person in the army counts, every single person. And it doesn't matter what they do, whether you're a trooper, a gunner, up to Major General, but it's the private soldiers and those junior ranks and everybody doing their part, which creates such an amazing organisation. And, get those people. And that's what I want to do. That's why I continue to do the job that I do, because I want society to see what incredible people these soldiers are, and what they give up is just amazing. And that's the good. And that's why I put up with the rest of it.
Wendy, before we move on, well, maybe this does kind of lead into the what next, what came next element, because I don't want to skip over the issue of spouses, because it is something that you've done a lot of work on. And if we're talking about Armed Forces Day, you can't talk about Armed Forces Day or Armed Forces Week without also talking about the spouses. And I know it's something that Bobby, you are engaged in through the choir, and Sal, you're a spouse, and your spouse is a spouse within the military. I just wanted to give you some time to just talk about that as well, because I think I wouldn't want us to miss out on it.
And I think that's really important, because the exhibition I did, Not Just a Wife, was literally that. And everyone said, oh, but we've got men as spouses as well. And I said, but everybody still treats them as wives. It's still that old adage. There was a complete mix of people. And again, it was seeing them for being the individuals that they are. And I remember there was one dinner night when I was doing the research for it all, and I went to a dinner night which was women only, because it was at the Defence Academy and it's international. And in order for some of the Middle Eastern ladies to come, there couldn't be any men there. So, there were no male waiters or anything. And I said to this lady, so what do you do? And she said, oh, my husband is. I said, no, that's not the question I asked you. I asked you, what do you do? And it transpired she'd spent her life working for an NGO, doing some incredible things in some incredible places. And I was just like, oh my God, that's amazing. And what I found with the exhibition was I only asked 3 questions. What did you want to do when you were 16? How has military life, how do you define community? And then what has military life taught you about yourself? And most of it was innate skills and innate bits and characteristics that made them sit and think and realize that they were a person. They weren't just sucked into this amorphous green blob, that they actually were people. We're all people. We're people. And so, spouses do an enormous amount, and they are unseen and unpaid and everything else. But actually, with that sense of community, it's just brilliant. I love it.
Sal, what did you do next?
Part of the reason I left the army was immediately after Iraq, we went for a 5-star luxury holiday to just find ourselves again and recover. And we were right in the frame on Boxing Day 2004 for the Asian tsunami. And we got wet, very wet. And Frances actually thought that I had been washed away because she didn't know where I was. I was actually trapped in an office that then filled with water. And I was sitting on a beam with my head on the ceiling and water up to my shoulders with about a foot left before I ran out of air. And when we came back, it kind of started to change perspective, because my wife and I were never out when we were in the military, even though by that stage the law had changed after we met and it was very legal. And I don't think we would have been out, because I worked in a very small organisation and life would have just been difficult. We were both lieutenant colonels. There were very few jobs. We could never be co-located. So we spent basically 6 years flying backwards and forwards from all sorts of places to try and be together for as many weekends as we could. And so I left to put down roots, and I wanted to settle in a community, in a family unit, and live together and have pets and become part of a community. And we settled in Blandford, of all places, which you Royal Signals people know very well. I didn't know at all. And we bought this old Georgian house in Blandford, and I became the registrar for Blandford Forum. And because it's a proper market, a little old country market town, I became very much at the heart of everything that was going on in the community, because of seeing people for births, deaths and marriages, literally their happiest times, their lowest times. And I remember we went to a Gurkha restaurant one Friday night, and we walked into the restaurant, and the people in the next table said, "Oh, hello, Sally." And Francis said, "How do you know them?" "Oh, yeah, I married them a couple of weeks ago." And the next table were then like, "Oh, hi, Sal, how are you? How do you know them?" A dog walking. And the next table was, "Hi, Sally, how do you know them?" Registered of death. And I literally, the entire ground floor of this restaurant, I knew every single person that was in there, because I'd finally settled somewhere and become part of a community. And it was great.
I never knew you'd been in the tsunami.
Me neither.
That's
That's news to me. I'm here with my mouth open. Blimey.
Yeah.
I knew that story, but I didn't know
Yeah, it
you'd
was,
been a registrar.
The Secret Life of Sal Purnell.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's amazing to be a registrar as well. Like you say, it's really at the heart of a community, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And surprisingly, the part of the job that I enjoyed the most was the death registrations, because it's where you could really make a difference for people. And very often it was an elderly person come to register the death of their spouse when they were in their 80s or 90s or whatever, and they didn't know what the process was or what had to happen next. And you could just spend half an hour with them and just help them and take some of the mystique out of it and make it less frightening and just be nice.
Do you know what I love
good
about
job.
this conversation? Well, I love all of it, but the thing that keeps flinging itself up at me is that when I think about, I know lots about Bridge with the amount of time that we now spend with each other. I think I irritate the hell out of her, but we still spend lots of time with each other. And I hate using the word journey, but just the different things that we have all done. But the one thread that runs through all of this, which I think was one of our first ever episodes, was about connection and about our purpose being about making a difference and the people we come across. And, Sal, hearing that from you and Wendy with the spouses and what you're doing with the work that you now do, Bridge, the same for you and what you've done in the UN. And I'm going to I go, yay me as well, because my coaching, I'm doing it in my way as well, but it's all different experiences. And yet at the root of all of this is how much we flipping love people and making a difference to others.
I think what people forget is it's actually the smallest things that make the difference. And it is just it can be a kind word or 5 minutes of your time to just listen to somebody else can make such a huge difference to that person. And sometimes you don't know the impact until later on, or maybe never. And it doesn't matter. And that's the thing, it doesn't matter whether you know or not. Because I think for me, the giving of my time, the giving of a hug, whatever it is, all the reward that I need, if it makes a difference, if someone goes away more informed or feeling better about what they're doing or something like that, that's enough. Because I never want people to felt how I felt on several occasions, because people have made me think I'm stupid and that sort of thing. when I know I'm not. It's just that I know different things. I don't know the same things. And we need so many different people in this world. Yeah, it's that connection, and that it's the giving. I love the
It feeds right back into that Maya Angelou quote: people won't remember what you said to them, but they will remember how you made them feel.
Absolutely agreed.
I want to do one more question though, and it is the lesson that we can learn from our younger self. So often the question we're asked is, well, what would you tell your younger self? But actually I want to just twist it on its head a little and go, what would you like your younger self to remind you of, or to tell you about how you can live your life now?
I think for me, it would be to remember that you can jump in and take a chance for no good reason other than, well, that sounds interesting, I'm going to go for that. Because I think the older you get, the more risk averse you get. And possibly that's because I've now got a disability, but I've become possibly a little bit too much risk averse.
Love that. And I'm looking forward to some opportunities to join in some random risk things. Although actually, having said that, Sally, the last thing you bloody did was wing walking. So yeah, I think you're already doing that.
I keep myself too fat so that I can't get on to the top of a plane. So you won't catch me doing it.
You can.
No.
Sure.
This is now confessional, and my brother will hear this because he wants me to go wing walking. So I keep checking what the maximum weight is for being able to get up onto the top of a plane, and then making sure I'm over it so that I wouldn't be able to.
Bobby.
It's surprising. Not very heavy.
Oh my word. Oh my goodness.
Wendy, what words of wisdom do you want to hear from your younger self?
I think it would be to stay creative and stay being yourself, because I was always trying different things and always doing things. And then there was a time where a number of key people told me I had a talent, but that I couldn't do things. And I listened to them rather than just listening to my younger self, who very much like Sal is just like, just do it, just give it a go. And I'm going back to that now, which frightens the bejeebies out of my children, who are just like, no, what are you doing now? So, and it's like, oh, have you seen Sal's done wing walking? No, don't do it, mother. But it's about taking every opportunity. And I think, one of the good things my parents did do was they took every opportunity and took us and showed us how to do that. And then that started to edge away by other people saying various bits and pieces. But yeah, I very definitely is listen to the younger self that says you can do that, and being creative is okay. You don't have to do the exams. You don't have to do that. I mean, I failed all my exams anyway, all through, which isn't helpful. My children going through A levels at this time. Well, how many did you get, Mother? That's not the point. That is not the point. So it is just, there's always an open door.
Just to sort of like round this off a little before we say something about Armed Forces Day at the end, we started off with the funniest recollection. Now just something random to throw in. If you were able to invite 3 people to dinner, dead or alive, who would they be and why?
I would invite 3 women. The first one is Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who really fought for rights of people and was amazing. I mean, she went through law school at Harvard and Columbia in the 1950s when women didn't. So she was really groundbreaking. I'd have loved to have met her. The second one would be Tina Turner, who had a very successful career as part of Icon Tina Turner, but then escaped the abuse and became a megastar. And for me, probably one of the best act I ever saw live was seeing her at 60 in a pair of stilettos in Cologne, running up and down the length of the stage and just never running out of puff, and to be able to sing at the top of her voice. She was brilliant. And the third one would be Julie Walters, because she's from the Black Country. She's a fantastic actor and a fantastic comedian, and we'd have a really, really good laugh.
Might have to see if we can get that sorted, Sal.
I think we should just invite her to our next get-together full stop, or have her as a speaker.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So if you're listening...
Julie, you know you want to.
We'll tag her.
Get in touch.
All right then, Wendy, what about yours?
Oh my goodness. So mine are, they've all gone, I'm afraid, which is a real shame. And they're a bit sort of random, but they're military related. So the first one would be Begum Hazrat Mahal, and it goes back to the Siege of Lucknow in 1857. She was the Indian princess who, so whilst the British soldiers, I don't know why I'm waving my arms around, nobody can see my arms. Just mad. So the Siege of Lucknow, she needed to rally the troops, and so she got on a painted elephant and rode it around the hill and the camp to just reinvigorate the soldiers and just to give a message and everything else. But I just think in 1857, for a woman to do that, it was just amazing. And the story behind why she was there is just fascinating. I'd love to know everything about her and find out more. And actually, it's on my bucket list of to go to India and just try and find out more about her. The other one is, I'm just sort of coming forward in time, Mary Seacole, because it's only recently that we started to learn about Mary Seacole. And of course, where I live now is quite close to where Florence Nightingale was working. And I hadn't realised how far away Florence Nightingale was from Crimea. But Mary Seacole was actually on the battlefields. And I just would love to meet her and just find out what it was like and what she was doing and why, and just have a chat with her, because her life is just amazing and spectacular. And the last one is, I was up at Edinburgh Fringe doing Army at the Fringe, and one of the other officers there said, you need to read this book, when I said we were moving to Turkey. I said, you need to read this book, and it's called To War with Whitaker, and it's Lady Ramfurly. And her husband was in the reserve. They were sent across to Egypt, and then war broke out. And so they said that all the wives had to go back. And it's just the travels of where she sort of complied and then thought, sod this, I want to be back with my husband. So they'd taken them to South Africa to get on a boat. And she went, no, and she found somebody and sold everything she could to buy a plane ticket to get her back up to North Africa to then try and find a job. So you could only stay if you had a job, and just everything about her time there. And just as the SAS was forming, in her diaries, so she says, and the Sterling brothers came in to the mess this evening. Such a lovely sight to see. It's just the way she does all these descriptions that we know now, you know, the guys who set up the SAS and all these people that she's describing at the time. And I just think she would just be a really fun character to be with. And sadly, yeah, she passed a few years ago. Yeah, To War with Whitaker. If anybody wants to read a journal about that time and about a strong woman who just said, no, I don't think so.
Excellent. Well, we post all of the links as well, so I will go on a hunt for all of these things. I also think that within this episode, we probably need to create a little bit of a glossary, because we have been using a number of TLAs.
Yeah.
I used one on the army the other day. I said NEPK, and everyone looked at me and I went,
Oh, Lord.
I got my own back. I know.
So to round us off, Armed Forces Day. This is about people coming back together, renewing or refreshing or just continuing to consolidate what it means to be a military community. And that, as we've been rightly pointing out, is not just the people who are serving, but all those who support those who serve, etc., and serving in different ways. So let's try this out. One word to what it means to being or staying in military community.
Belonging.
Love it.
I would use community as well. I mean, because that's what it is. Can I turn it into a plural?
That's
Is
allowed.
that one word? Can I do
Communities.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yes.
Belonging, communities, it's the acceptance of one and all.
And what about you and Bridge?
For one word. Bridge?
Don't think I've ever been able to say just one word, have I? Love.
You little sod. That was about the one that I was about to use. We do this all the time. So I'm going to have to come up with
We're like
another
one
one.
brain.
Oh my God.
It's like one
So
brain.
now all talk amongst yourselves while I think of another one. I think I'd have to say love as well. I'm not going to be original. It's absolutely what I think. You know, I sit here with the four of you, three of you, four with me. I can't even count. But it is love. It's love on all different levels, but just the closeness I feel to people who have had shared experience, I think is enormous. I'm forever grateful for it.
And I think with Armed Forces Day as well, what I would encourage everybody to do is go out and meet the people, meet the soldiers, meet the communities that are around it. Because I think that there is a lot of stereotyping, and the only time you see us is in the news, and it's not necessarily the best of news, but just go and meet them and see that they're people and enjoy their company and listen to them. You might learn something.
I agree. And I think the whole piece that we've been going through on this recording, being the good, the bad and the ugly, it's a bit like you're saying, Wendy, about what's said in the news, etc., isn't always great. But as we've all been saying, the good so outweighs the rest of it. That's why meeting the people who are doing this on a daily basis are the people who are worth meeting.
Thank you so much. It's been such a lovely chat. Regardless of whether it makes a good podcast episode, I don't really care. It's been really lovely to speak to you all and hear lots of stuff, like actually learn stuff that I didn't know as well. So thank you so much, Sal, Wendy, and as always, Bobby, my partner in crime.
Yay.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. We hope you had as much fun with this episode as we did recording it. As always, the resources are on the More Than a Lumpy Jumper website and the Spotify podcast page. If you've been enjoying the podcast, we'd really appreciate your support by voting for More Than a Lumpy Jumper in the Listener's Choice section in the British Podcast Awards. We're continuing the theme of reunions next week with another dear friend from our Sandhurst days, the wonderful Reverend Alison Riley, who is not the Vicar of Dibley, much to my disappointment, but is a vicar at Church with a youth ministry for 11 to 18-year-olds. We're going to be talking about faith and spirituality in leadership. So do come and join us for being a person for a bigger purpose. See you then.